Hey guys, just something I have to address real quick before getting to the video, because I screwed up in a major way. Where I was looking to get the episode names, I misread the name of Chapter 13. I thought it was called Finally, but I was rushing to get this done before I had to leave for work, so it was actually Finale. So before progressing real quick, Chapter 13 is called Our Way. I'm sorry for the mix-up. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is the Sentinel watching over Geekdom, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Been a while since I visited this. Today we will be finishing our reviews of RWBY Volume 6, looking at Chapter 12, Seeing Red, and Chapter 13. Finally, as always, I will be talking spoilers, but the episodes are now free to the general public on Rooster Teeth's website. Links in the description box below, so if you don't want to be spoiled, pause this video, go to the description box, and watch the episodes I'll be covering. And there is one more thing I'm going to ask you guys. After RWBY Volume 6 concluded, some stuff happened. And I'm going to ask you, or no, I'm going to tell you. Do not bring up the Vic Mignogna thing in my comments, please. Whether you're for what happened, against what happened, I don't care. This is not about that. This is a review of the episodes, of the final 2 episodes of Volume 6. If you comment on the Vic Mignogna situation, your comment will be deleted. Again, kick Vic, stand with Vic, I don't care, it's being deleted. So with that out of the way, this was a decent conclusion to this volume. Both these episodes were, because they kind of go hand in hand. I think I like episode 12 more than I like episode 13. But I'll get to that kind of when I talk about episode 13. But on the whole, as I've talked about in the past with some of these episodes, this is hard to talk about because most of these episodes are action set pieces, and as I said, not being an animator, not being a fight choreographer, commenting on them exactly is gonna be difficult. Like, I can usually remember the big standout moments of the fights, but it's the small moments in between, and that I have trouble remembering, and sometimes it's those small moments that really contribute greatly to the fight. So, episode 11, Seeing Red, again, is divided into 2 parts. The first part is the majority of the group, Ruby, Oscar, Maria, Crow, Jean, Nora, Ren, fighting Cordova. Cordo. They call her Cordo. And then part B, the second half of the episode, is Yang and Blake fighting Adam. And, how do I want to go up? How do I want to approach this? The Cordo fight, I mean. I've got plenty to talk about that Adam fight. But it was a decent fight, I guess I'll say. But it's not one I was very engaged in. Even though she was funny, I didn't find Cordo that engaging of a character, so it was just like, okay, can we get through this a little faster, please? That was a lot of my thoughts every time we cut back to her. Although, I like how the team works together during this fight, And I do think we get a different kind of foe here, because in the past, a lot of the fights have been with monsters, the Grimm, or the human opponents, and it's been, man-to-man, it's been, sort of a duel, I guess is the best way to explain it. And what I like about the Cordo fight is that it's the group versus a woman in a giant mech. And what I like about that is it forces the team to think. It forces them to reevaluate their strategy. And a lot of this fight shows off because also it shows, rather than just being a straightforward fight, two people clashing swords, so to speak, they're fighting someone who is thinking. This is probably one of the main character's most strategic battles to date. And I like that. It showed them thinking, it showed them adapting new strategies, and it similarly showed Cordo adapting her own strategies. And it showed her thinking as well. Like, the standout moment for me of this was that one of the mech's arms is a cannon arm, and it has a rocket launcher on it. And John comes up with the idea that when the rocket launcher opens, the shields have to drop to fire the rockets. Wow, I can't believe I forgot that word. So the strategy is to coax her into firing the rockets so that they can get a shot in and overload the system and boom, boom, splodey. But then, as we see, Cordo catches on to this and Cordo falls for it and she gets ready to fire the rockets. But then she sees RWBY ready to take the shot and she cancels the sequence. And see, like I said, a lot of the fights, because they've been these duels, they've been these one-on-one fights, a lot of them haven't been that strategic, but this one has, and I like it. And yeah, there's really no more to that. I like the fight really just for that. It shows a more strategic side to the characters. And then we get the Yang and Blake versus Adam fight, which was the better of the two fights. And there's been a lot of talk about Adam recently with the end of this storyline here. Because this storyline has been going on, at the very least, since Volume 3. Arguably since the Black trailer, but I don't count it because that took place prior to Volume 1, and this plotline didn't really come up in Volume 1 or Volume 2. It didn't really come into play until Volume 3. But yeah, this... And a lot of people have been talking about Adam, saying he's been underutilized, he's been poor developed, he's been wasted potential. None of which is true. We've seen the kind of person Adam is. And... well, I think I said it in an earlier episode review. Adam is a terrorist. He puts on the guise of being a rebel, of being a freedom fighter, because that is what the Faunists need. But as we've seen, he doesn't care. He is doing this to accomplish to sate his own bloodlust. Like, he doesn't care about equal rights for the Faunists. He cares about making the people that hurt him pay. That is what his vendetta, that is the major source of his vendetta against Blake. She left him. It wounded his pride. She has to pay. And that's why I like the Volume 6 trailer, the Adam trailer, so much, because it explains his actions, but it never excuses them. It pretty plainly says, this is a monster. And, yeah, aside from the fight itself was really good, we see how Adam affects Blake and Yang. Like, there's this moment where where Yang freezes, and on the whole, actually, I feel Yang's PTSD after the events of Volume 3 haven't been that well done. Like, it only really seems to come up when the plot demands it comes up. Like, in Volume 4, she has a nightmare. In Volume 5, she starts shaking after she punches that guy in the rest stop. And then for the most part, that's pretty much it. So that really, as far as as far as Yang is concerned, that is my one issue as far as this particular story thread has gone. That Yang's PTSD hasn't really been properly explored. And Adam dies. And at the end of this amazing fight, it's a really satisfying conclusion to Adam's arc. And, it's like Pyrrha. And I know this is going to be controversial, but here's what all I'm going to say on it. If you have RWBY Volume 3 on Blu-ray, watch the cast commentary, because they go into this even before Volume 1 was released. I think even when Volume 1 was in the development stages, the plan was Pyrrha was always going to die. And, her death serves a major focus, a major function to the plot. And that is why I am against bringing Pyrrha back, because there is no purpose for it anymore. And her death was a major motivation to Jean and RWBY. And every time I think about this, I think of Genkai from Yu Yu Hakusho. Because Genkai is my favorite character in that show. And her death, besides being one of my favorite episodes, was a major turning point for Yusuke. It developed his character, and I'm not talking about in terms of powers, because he also got some new powers for Genkai, but her death was a major turning point for Yusuke. It was a major source of character development. And then in the next story arc, she came back, and all the character development that happened because of her death was gone. And even though a lot of people want Pyrrha back, that is my issue. Bringing her back would undo the character development that Jean and RWBY have made. And similar here. Boy, that was a tangent. And similar here. Adam, in terms of the plot, Adam was a major plot point for Blake and Yang. And now that he's dead, that story is complete. There is no reason to bring him back. Which, by the way, if it wasn't the 2 blades in his chest that killed him, because we saw his aura break before that, then it was definitely getting his rock bashed on a skull as he fell off a cliff. Also, Carrie confirmed he's dead, so there's that. And yeah, like I said, there's not really much to talk about with Chapter 12, because so mostly it's just my own feelings regarding the development of the plot. And really because of that, I'm going to give... Also, here, there is one more thing, I guess. I'm going to give Chapter 12, Seeing Red, because I almost forgot to, a C, because all we really get here is stuff to serve the plot there, but that's pretty much it, and it leads into the build-up of the final fight for Chapter 13. Now, C is not bad, a C is just very average. So, actually thinking back on it, I think that might be the lowest grade I've given an episode of Volume 6. And that leads us into Chapter 13, finally. Which, that could be taken as a pun on how long it's taken me to finish these reviews, but it's the name of the episode. And what happened is, during the fight with Cordo, a giant kaiju grim called a Leviathan appeared and started making its way towards Argus. I blanked on the name for a second. Excuse me, it's really warm. And now, what has happened is, because Cordo's mech has been disabled, the only method of fighting the Leviathan has been disabled, and now it's up to the group to fight this kaiju in person. It's a kaiju. Oh, shoot. Before that, though, we get a little more of Cinder and Neo, basically making their way to Atlas. And that's it. So I will say, even though Neo came back, and I'm fine with it, like I said, I think I said, actually, I'm okay with Neo coming. I'm indifferent. But thinking back on it now, the Cinder stuff has been the weakest part of Volume 6. Because we're not really getting anything. It's just, you know, after her appearance at the post-credit scene of Volume 1, which, by the way, I'm kind of going by Blu-ray on this, and the Blu-rays edit the episodes together so that it plays more like a movie. But what happened is, Cinder revealed herself at the very end of Volume 1, and she played behind the scenes of Volume 2 and Volume 3, and then she was maimed by RWBY, which led to her sort of crippling in Volume 4 and readjustment in Volume 5. But here's the thing. After Volume 4, yeah, I'd say after Volume... So starting with Volume 5, Cinder has kind of stagnated. And, every time we get a Cinder scene, it's the same thing. I want revenge on RWBY. And it's just... That's my problem. I feel like every time we get Cinder, it's just meandering, because we're not really getting all that new. She's not working to a plan, she's working to her own ends, and it's the same thing every time. So it's just... And also, I've always liked Cinder okay. She hasn't been one of my favorite villains, but she's been somewhere in the middle, because I've liked Roman more. I've liked Hazel more. You've heard me gush about Salem in these reviews. Salem being my favorite villain of RWBY overall. And it's just... Like I said, I feel the Cinder stuff was just meandering at this point. And it's just... We're not really getting anything new. It's more of the same. And after that, we get to this fight with the Leviathan, which... I will say this, of all the climactic fights, because there's always a big fight that happens at the end of the season, this is probably the weakest one we've had. Like, it's not the grim attack of Beacon, which is still my favorite. It's not Pyrrha versus Cinder. It's not, that fight with Torchwick at the docks. It's not Team Ranger versus the Nuclevi. This one just seems to fall short of the mark. And it also seems, compared to those other fights that I just mentioned from the other volumes, this one moves really slowly. And I think part of it is that the team doesn't have the help of Argus on their side, because the Elysian military at the start of this fight says, yeah, we have you marked as hostile, you're on your own. But... yeah, I think that's really it. This fight just progresses at a slower pace. And I think it's partially because the Leviathan is so massive. It doesn't... It's more that it's not fighting back. It's that their attacks don't really have an effect on it. Although the fight does end in a... good way. Kind of. Where do I want to go with that? There's two points I can diverge off of to go continuing there. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to go on first. I'll start with RWBY. So the fight ultimately climaxes with RWBY having to use her Silver Eyes power, and I like this scene because it shows that RWBY is progressing, but she hasn't learned yet, like the first two times she used her power in Volume 3 and Volume 5, it was an accident. It was triggered by her reflexes, by her grief. And then in this volume, with the apathy, Maria had to coach her into using her powers. So what I like about it here is that RWBY now knows what her powers are, and she started to have some training on how they work, but she's not there yet. She doesn't immediately know how to use them. She still has to work at it. She still needs to practice on it. It's... No, I am not making that comparison. Yeah, that's the bottom line. She has new powers. She's not a master of them. She's still learning. And the progression is very logical. discovering them by accident, triggering them by reflexes, being coached, and now taking that coaching to heart and trying it for yourself. We also get Jin again, which was fun. Not much more to say about that. Summoning Jin freezes time, and yeah, RWBY just needed more time. I will say, prior to this episode, I was spoiled on Twitter by all the screenshots of Summer, but I actually thought that was like a reveal that Summer was alive, but nope, it's one of the memories RWBY is drawing on, which is nice. I like that. It does defeat a headcanon I've kind of had for... It does kind of disprove a headcanon I've had for a while, and that is that Summer died shortly after RWBY was born. Because if that sort of montage was any indication, it's that Summer died after RWBY was at least old enough to form coherent memories of her. But, yeah, no. Because this is another debate in the fandom, that's where I fall in that debate as well. Summer is still dead. Summer is not off somewhere. She's not secretly alive. She is dead. And RWBY is able to activate her powers to petrify the Leviathan, but unlike the dragon from Volume 3, it doesn't turn him to stone, and he is still... And he starts to break through when Cordo shows up. And that was kind of the other thing I had issue with, is that Cordo's turn here, her turn from being this staunch, proud woman into, who was vehemently opposed to everyone who wasn't Elysian, into being a more supportive woman, it felt really fast, like, we get a couple of cuts and they're really fast of Cordo just having this sort of what have I done moment, but we didn't get I don't think we got enough of that. We didn't get enough of her weighing her options, realizing she made the wrong choice, realizing that people are going to die because of her obsession with stopping these people. It happened, like, it seemed like it happened at the turn of a hat, at the toss of a coin. But yeah, the Cordo shows up with her mech, destroys the Leviathan, and then she turns a blind eye and lets the group proceed to Atlas. Which, of all the ideas in my head about Atlas, what they gave us, I was not expecting. And a lot of YouTubers I follow on Twitter, again, have pointed to dialogue suggesting that Atlas is a floating city, or the kingdom of Atlas is a floating kingdom. Which is an interesting idea, actually, now that I think about it, it's kind of funny, because Mistral is a kingdom, a very elevated kingdom, for lack of a better word. Like, it's built into mountains and hills, and the higher up cities and towns and buildings are the upper class, and the lower, more ground level is, the criminal underworld, the seedier parts of town, the lower class. And having Atlas as a kingdom in the sky, because if I remember World of Remnant right, which I'm kind of overdue for a watch on, Mistral and Atlas are kind of close. So it kind of adds to that hierarchy, and the cliffhanger that ends on, with, the Elysian military basically saying, welcome home, because I think that was their in to Atlas, is that they're under the guise of bringing Weiss back. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Atlas from this point out. And the post-credit scene. Oh, I love this scene. It's a little on the nose, too, but it's a Salem scene. And as you could tell from my gushing from whatever the previous episode was, I don't recall, but excuse me. These scenes are always great. And shoot! No, I forgot one thing. I'll come back to that. Also, during the fight with the Leviathan, Oscar, because Maria was disabled, Oscar had to crash land their aircraft. And later he says that Ozpin guided me on how to do it. Which, after the episode that came after The Lost Fable, I'm trying to remember what it was. Ozpin has been AWOL, basically. And I kind of like the implication of this scene, because if you saw me talking about the treatment that Ozpin has gotten from the other characters and that trope that I hate, I think Ozpin is a character undeserving of the hate he's been getting. And I kind of like this scene because it shows Ozpin's sort of own development. Like, for as long as he's fought Salem, obviously, he's been the one calling the shots. He's been the one commanding everything. And what I like about this scene is that the implication of it is that Ozpin has started to realize maybe that's not the best way of going about things. And, he's going to let other people call the shots from now on. He'll still be there to help. He may be there to lend a helping hand, but he's not the one in charge. And he's going to see how that plays out. At least that's my theory. And back to the post-credits scene. So, we finally get more of this scene takes place in Salem's domain. Emerald and Mercury are watching Salem. And she is spawning Barangol Grimm, which we haven't really seen since the Volume 4 trailer. The Barangol are ape-like Grimm. And she's giving them wings. Which is also kind of funny because of how on the nose it is, which, if you're unfamiliar with RWBY, basically every character is an allusion to a literary character, a fairy tale character, a mythological character, and in one very rare instance, an internet meme. But yeah, no, like, for example, Ruby is Little Red Riding Hood, Weiss is Snow White, Nora is Thor, Jeanne d'Arc is Joan of Arc. And it's just, like I said, they all allude to these various literary characters. And the joke there that I find so funny is that, so on the nose, is that ape-like Grimm, Salem is making flying monkeys. But as Emerald and Mercury are watching this, Hazel shows up and says, there's an old saying. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. So now the board is set for Atlas this time, and all the pieces are converging there. And what I hope here is that we see Salem as a much more active protagonist now, because so far, since her reveal in Volume 3, and then from Volume 4 onward, she's been a very Emperor Palpatine-like figure. She's been on the sidelines pulling the strings, but I hope that what this ending means is that with Volume 7, we're going to see Salem be much more active, which, if that pans out to be true, I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, so the finale of Volume 6 was good, but not as great as some of the previous episodes, and not as great as some of the previous season finales, so I'm going to give it a B+. But those were just my thoughts. What were yours on these two episodes? Start a conversation in the comments below, like, comment, subscribe, and then click the little bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload, because subscribe doesn't do that. Along with the links to the episodes, in the description box below, you'll find the link to my Twitter, where you can get updates on me and the channel. And you will also find the link to my Ko-fi, where you can support the channel. This is the Sentinel, watching over Geekdom, and I'll see you guys next time.